This is Xi Jinping, a baby with ambitious plans to take over the world in the next few decades. However, at the time, you would have thought this baby would be destined to failure. You see, by the time Xi was 9 years old, his father was declared a traitor, imprisoned by the Chinese government. His sister committed suicide, and his mother was forced to condemn her family in fear of her life. Shortly after, Xi was exiled to a labor camp to get re-educated for 7 years. At the time, Xi Jinping was basically a nobody to the world. His friends and enemies had no idea that one day he would rule all of China. He was treated like trash, and everything he knew was ripped away from him. When you grow up with nothing, when you have no power, no money, and are forced to kneel to the system, you start to crave everything: power, prestige, and prosperity. But there was a problem. Xi knew that he wouldn't be able to achieve any of this if he followed in his father's footsteps. So he embraced the very thing that tore his family apart and devoted his life to the Chinese Communist Party. But I mean seriously, this guy wanted to be in the Chinese government so badly that he applied to join 7 times, and all 7 times he was rejected. But on his 8th try, he got in. Over the next several years, he strategically maneuvered through the bureaucracy, slowly consolidated power, and quickly rose the ranks until in 2013, when his life changed forever. In 2013, Xi defied all odds and went from being a nobody in a labor camp to becoming the most powerful man in all of China.
我宣誓，忠于中华人民共和国宪法。
Over the next 5 years, he executed mass surveillance campaigns, got rid of anyone who disagreed with him, censored anything that threatened his rule, consolidated even more power, and even removed presidential term limits, cementing himself as the leader of China for life. And finally, it seemed like he had achieved everything he ever wanted: power, prestige, and prosperity. But this was only the beginning. Even when he ruled all of China, people that met him said it was obvious he wanted more. Xi had his eyes set on something else, something more, something that would actually make a mark on a 4,000-year-old culture, something that would stand the test of time. Xi Jinping wanted to start a brand new chapter in Chinese history as the first Chinese supreme leader of the world. And then, and only then, would he have achieved his dream of power, prestige, and prosperity. And this is how China will control the world. In order for a country to truly rule the world, that country's currency needs to be the world's reserve currency. Why? Because when you control the world's reserve currency, you control the very thing that humans need to pay for life. Shelter, food, water, healthcare, education. You control who has access to it, you control its value, you control governments, economies, and countries. But what does it mean to be the world reserve currency? It means other governments and institutions want to own a lot of that currency. They crave it because it makes their financial lives easier with international trade, debt repayment, and investments because, well, everyone else uses it. Think about it. If you're France and you're doing business with South Africa, do you want to be paid in South African rand or in US dollars? But here's the thing, you don't just fill out an application to gain this sort of world reserve currency privilege. There's no international organization that says, okay, now's your turn to be the world superpower. So what's a player gotta do to join the big leagues? Easy, just follow the secret playbook on how to be a world superpower. That's exactly what the US did. It's the 1900s. You're a young United States with dreams to be a world superpower. Your plan? Turn the US dollar into the world's reserve currency. But there's just one problem. The British pound currently holds that title. But you're the United States. You don't just give up when times get hard. If you want something, you take it. So naturally, you start scheming. You know that most countries in the world are on the gold standard, meaning their money is tied to how much gold they have in their reserves, so you come up with a brilliant plan. Steal all their gold. Legally, of course. And lucky for you, an opportunity reveals itself in a few years. World War I. Countries go to war, and war requires money. You see, these countries can't just print more money because their money is tied to their gold reserves. So what do? They get off the gold standard so they can print more money to pay for the war. But it's not enough. That's where you swoop in. You, being the friendly and selfless United States you are, generously offer to lend these countries more money. Not for free, of course. You give them money in exchange for their gold. By the end of World War I, although you have a good amount of gold saved up, it's not enough. You want more, and fortunately, just before you go back to the drawing board, another opportunity pops up.
That no such undertaking has been received, and that consequently this country is at war with Germany.
World War II. Countries go to war and war requires money. And again, you being the generous saver you are, tell them you'll give them everything they need, weapons, food, clothes, money, in exchange for more gold. In a few decades, you, the United States, went from being a nobody to becoming a global superpower, owning about 75% of the world's gold reserves. Your master plan of being the world reserve currency is almost complete. Now, you just need others to fall in line. So in 1944, you kickstarted the Bretton Woods Agreement, where you announced the US dollar is now pegged to your gold reserves, meaning people could exchange the US dollar for gold. And other countries loved this and decided to peg their currency to the US dollar, automatically making you the new world reserve currency and the new world superpower. Power, prestige, prosperity. So the world superpower playbook goes like this. Be a large global economy with some clout, find a global economic weakness and exploit it, and get other countries to fall in line. And you see, Xi Jinping knows this playbook by heart. He's been checking off the boxes for the past decade. And lucky for him, an opportunity is starting to reveal itself. The US realized one very important thing when it became the new world superpower. They realized that the world order ebbs and flows, and if the US doesn't actively maintain its dominance, then a gap opens up for another country to take its place. That's why whenever the US sees a country step out of line, they'll have no problem invading them, killing their civilians, destroying cities, toppling their governments, committing war crimes, all in an attempt to remind them who's in charge. But nowadays, the US can't just go to war every time a country does something they don't like, because nowadays, everyone has these big scary weapons that can destroy the world as we know it. So what does the US do instead of this? They use an invisible weapon, sanctions. Instead of invading another country, crippling their infrastructure, killing their people, and toppling their government, the US would just hit their pocketbooks and cripple their economy. But there's just one problem. What would you do if you see a bully constantly pick on you and everyone else on the playground year after year? Would you just cower in fear and accept the punches, or would you stand up and fight back? You see, most countries would just take the punishment, but after decades of hiding in fear, some are starting to fight back. Countries like China and Russia are tired of the United States' unchecked power and are looking for ways to reduce their dependency on the US dollar. Why? Because the less they rely on the world's reserve currency, the less financial influence the US has on them. But you know, when it comes to standing up to a bully, power is in the numbers. That's why China and Russia are secretly recruiting more countries to their side, building up favors, stroking fear that the US may sanction them next, and creating this new unofficial alliance against the US. And this might be the perfect opportunity China needs. By 2012, Xi announced his master plan to rejuvenate China, dubbed China's Dream. And since then, he's been on a rampage to achieve it. A year later, Xi announced his $1 trillion Belt and Road Initiative, which set his master plan in motion. The objective? To literally connect China with the rest of the world with mega infrastructure projects. So far, 146 countries across Asia, Africa, and Europe already signed up to join this new vision. I mean, why not? China is offering to build a huge new network of railways, energy pipelines, highways, border crossings, ports, and more, all paid for by China. But of course, just like how the US gave weapons, money, and food to other countries in exchange for gold during times of desperation, there is, how should I say, an ulterior motive that plays perfectly into China's master plan. You see, when China offers to build all this infrastructure, it's not for free. The countries are taking out a loan, an IOU to China that they'll need to eventually pay back. And these IOUs are getting shockingly big. So far, these countries owe China more than $385 billion, and some may never be able to pay them back. For one, the Congo owes China debt that exceeds 50% of their GDP, the Maldives debt exceeds 40% of their GDP, and Angola 38%. And an interesting byproduct of this is that all these IOUs will actually expand the adoption of the Chinese yuan, because these countries will likely need to pay back in Chinese currency. And this point will be very important just a bit later. Remember when I talked about China building up an unofficial partnership against the US because it's hard to stand up to a bully when you're alone? Well, this $1 trillion mega infrastructure project might have something to do with this. You see, when you're an economically small country and you owe China billions of dollars, you obviously feel compelled to support them in whatever they do. Voluntarily, of course. Power, prestige, and prosperity. And everything is going to plan. In 2010, the yuan was ranked 35th in the international payments market, meaning how popular the currency is in the world. Today, the Chinese yuan is ranked number 4, cementing itself as one of the most popular international currencies in the world. But there might be something preventing it from getting stronger, and it's not what you think. So you're China, you're following the world superpower playbook very closely. Everything you've been doing has been working out better than expected, but there's just one problem. Countries are demanding you fix this one issue with the Chinese yuan, but the question is, do you really need to, or even want to fix it? You see, there's a reason you skyrocketed to be the world's second largest economic power behind the US in only a few decades. There's a reason you're on track to overtake the US economy in the next few years. There's a reason people call your economic growth an economic miracle, a never-before-seen phenomenon. And that reason is control. You have unlimited control over your people. Are people saying Xi Jinping looks like Winnie the Pooh? Well, ban the image of Pooh in China. Are children playing video games for too long? Then make it illegal to play more than 3 hours a week. Are there controversial media topics about you and your control? Then censor the media and internet. And why stop there? You don't like how your people are spending their money? Restrict their options. Are other countries not buying enough of your products? Easy. Devalue your own currency, making your products cheaper, and then others will be forced to buy them from you. You see, because of how much control you have over your currency, other countries aren't comfortable holding it in their reserves because it's risky. Of course, you know this, but you kind of don't care because you have another master plan in place that's playing out perfectly. What if I told you you could save a lot of time doing something you already do? What if you could save a lot of money too? What if you can do all this and more without making any big changes in your daily routine? You see, right now, if you're a business, let's say in Ethiopia, and you want to send money to another business in Angola, you'll first need to exchange your Ethiopian currency for the US dollar. And assuming you're not banned from the US dollar's global financial systems, you'll have to pay wire transfer fees, fill out a bunch of paperwork, pray the currency doesn't fluctuate, and that exchange rates don't eat you up. When it's all said and done in about a couple of days' time, you're left with only a fraction of what you originally sent over. But what if I said there's a way to bypass this entire protocol?
Let's look at the development of blockchain cryptocurrency technology in China. Xi believes blockchain can play a key part in the real economy as it helps address financing difficulties and financial risks.
Fast forward a few years and in comes the digital yuan, where you'll be able to make payments faster, cheaper, without the US financial system. Oh, and you don't need the internet or have a bank account either. The digital yuan is China's central bank digital currency, or CBDC, that aims to replace China's physical cash. Think of it like Bitcoin, except it's controlled by the Chinese government. Look, it's clear that China is leading the world in digital currency adoption. They've been working on this national digital currency since 2014. The US, on the other hand, only recently started working on theirs. In the past 2 years, the digital yuan has seen a total of $13.68 billion in transactions across 261 million users. China's master plan is to expand its digital yuan internationally. And this is a key that can change everything. You see, China is already the leading manufacturer of all the world's consumer products. And by creating a convenient dollar alternative that you would have to use to purchase their goods, they would automatically increase the international demand for the yuan. And remember the over 146 countries that signed up to join the Belt Road Initiative? Well, China could request all payments from these countries be made with digital yuan. All for their own benefits, of course, since it'll be faster and cheaper for them. And once these countries start making transactions in digital yuan year after year to pay off massive amounts of debt, they'll form a habit, start transacting in it, and maybe adopt it as one of their default currencies, because it'll make their financial lives easier. Power, prestige, and prosperity. Look, we know there's a bunch of moving parts right now for China to achieve their vision, but the question is, will Xi Jinping succeed? Will the Chinese yuan be the next world reserve currency, and will China be the next world superpower? The answer is complicated. You see, no matter how hard of a pill it is to swallow, power shifts are inevitable. No government, no economic system, no currency, and no empire lasts forever. Empires rise and fall over long periods of time. We can even look back at history. The Dutch Empire lasted from the 1600s to 1800s, which was then overtaken by the British, from the 1700s to the 1900s, and then overtaken by the US. And there's no reason to think that this time it'll be any different. Although the US is still currently the dominant empire in the world, the truth is, it has gotten weaker from growing wealth gaps, increasing political divide, and excessive money printing. Sure, the US dollar is still the world's reserve currency, but if the US government continues to drive the value of the dollar down by printing more money, then there's a real risk for another currency to take its place. But even with all these problems, there's still a chance the US can recognize them in time, fix them, and delay the power shift for many more years to come. But one thing is for sure. Xi Jinping is doing everything he can to make China stronger and richer, to start a brand new chapter in world history, one where it no longer needs to stand up to a bully, because it will become the bully. Power, prestige, and prosperity.